Good morning, Texoma, and thanks for joining us this morning. We are talking about new restrictions that have recently hit Texoma, Wichita Falls specifically, pretty hard. Joining us now with the very latest details and how this all affects you is the man who definitely knows it all, Daniel Nix. He is the Utilities Operation Manager. The man in charge is what we like to call him here at News Channel 6. So Daniel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Stage 3 drought emergency, that is now what the city of Wichita Falls has entered into. What does that mean and how did we get here?
Well, we didn't get here overnight. Obviously, we've been on this slow track for the last 2 years. We started 2010 with basically full lakes. We were about 97% combined storage capacity. And then 2011 got here, and it was hot and it was dry. I think, you know, we set some records that year, 13 inches of rainfall instead of 28, 100 days over 100 degrees, and that took its toll on our supply. And we went into stage 1, drought watch, which is all of the voluntary measures back in August of 2011. And that carried us all the way to June of 2012, and of course it was a little bit better in 2012. We got a little bit more rainfall, but we were still below average, and we were still fairly hot. So in June of 2012, we had declined to about 50%, and that's what triggered our stage 2 drought warning. That's when all of those mandatory things kicked in, the once-a-week watering. And we started working on the stage 3 restrictions because we didn't really have specific ones on the books. And the Water Resources Committee that answers to the council came together, formed a task force of businesses to help guide them on these regulations. And in September of 2012, we set the stage 3 restrictions that we are enacting as of this week.
So it seems like, wow, you know, a lot's happened within the last year. If you're new to this area, or maybe, you know, you're just now starting to feel the effects, you think, why in the last year have things gotten so bad? But like you said, this has just been a gradual process.
That's correct.
And I want to kind of hit back on the Water Resources Committee and the ones who are making all these decisions. I think it's interesting to note that they are volunteers.
That's correct. We have an engineer on the staff, we have educators, we even have an at-large position on the committee, and they're the ones that are really making the tough decisions, and that is, what do we regulate, when do we regulate it, and to what level? And when they boil all of that down, they hand it to the council and say, this is, to the best of our knowledge, the best that we can do and will get us where we need to be. And the council then takes action whether they want to or not. They can say yay or nay on what the committee recommends, but that's really how you get your restrictions.
A lot of detail, a lot of work going on. I found it interesting though, you said stage 3, it's been so long since we've been here. When was the last time do you believe we hit stage 3?
Well, we've been this low in the lakes before, back in the last drought in '99 and 2000. But then our drought triggers were 10% lower.
Okay.
So when we were at the level we are now, we were only at stage 2. The Water Resources Committee, when we came out of that drought and we revised our drought plan, said we want to move those triggers up 10%. So we actually trigger 10% higher now than we did before. And that really came from a lot of information that the committee was receiving from the public. The public wanted those triggers to occur sooner. So they took all of that into consideration, and that's why we've never been in stage 3, but we've been this low before.
That's interesting to note.
Before last year was very vague for stage 3. And so as we looked at our projections on how long would we be in stage 2, they decided it's time to go ahead and put very specific restrictions on the books for stage 3. And they brought in they created a task force. They brought in specific groups of people that they were looking at regulating and restricting and got their input, what they could do, what they couldn't do. And it was just a great effort by everyone, the task force, the volunteers on the committee, and we got, I think, a very good program put together and in front of the council.
How long did it take them to come up with that?
It took several weeks. We had several day-long meetings with the task force, and then we brought them all back together for a day to discuss everything with everyone together. And then we briefed the council, and it went to council. So it was several weeks long.
A lot of planning.
Yes.
And now, you know, it's just now kicked into place within the last week. So a lot of changes to get to. We, of course, want to break those down for you and answer how these new restrictions affect you, affect your water bill, and your daily life. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with much more. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are talking about Stage 3 drought emergency in Wichita Falls. The trigger was officially pulled on Wednesday, so you know it's almost been a week since this started taking effect, and of course lots of restrictions in place, and we want to get to those. But something I really wanted to talk about with you was the percentage of water reduction, and I love how you break this down for us and what that really means, because you hear, okay, reduce your water by 35%, but what does that mean, and how did you come up with that number?
We set goals for all of our triggers, and in Stage 2 it was 15%. And I want to say that everything that we looked at through the 7 months we were in Stage 2 indicated that the citizens were doing a great job. They were hitting that 15%. They were doing what it was taking. Now, Stage 3, we tack another 20% on.
Yeah.
So the ultimate goal is 35%. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can get that 35% reduction. And what we do in the city is we take the month that we're in, say we're in February now. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do is I'll go back for 5 years, and I'll look at 5 years worth of Februarys. I'll average those together, and then we will see if we can get 35% below that number.
35% sounds like a lot, and it's already lower in February versus maybe August or the middle of summer, correct?
That's
for
right.
Wichita Falls.
Yeah.
And why is that? Because we're not doing maybe as much irrigation this time of year, and what are some of the other reasons?
Well, in the summer, irrigation of the lawns is the biggest user of water. Mm-hmm. It can be 35 to 50% of your water bill. But in February, you're not irrigating, mm-hmm. and we still want that 35% reduction.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a little bit harder to get, but we're encouraging people to look at how they use water in the home. The biggest area that you use water in the home is in the bathroom. And so we've been focusing a lot of our public communication and our education in the bathroom.
That's interesting, because you might think the kitchen, or maybe even doing laundry, might not think the bathroom. So what are some things maybe people can do?
In the bathroom, obviously you want to see how you're using your water. If you're running it while you're brushing your teeth, mm-hmm. don't do that. Just turn it off. You don't need to run it. But the biggest user of water in the bathroom is the toilet. And we ask people for two things with that. One, check for leaks. You don't really notice a leak on the toilet. Mm-hmm. It's really quiet, but it's real easy to check. It's usually the flapper valve, if you do find it. Easy to fix, it's cheap to repair, and once you do repair it, it pays for itself the first month in water savings.
I have replaced that myself, so it is that easy to replace, and it just takes maybe 5 minutes, and it doesn't even cost a lot.
And the testing is just as easy. My 9-year-old daughter and I tested our toilets, and she found it amazing. And so, I mean, you can make a family event out of it.
Yeah, make a fun thing out of it, sure. And what do? You just put a little food coloring, right? In the back?
Food coloring in the tank in the back. Don't flush it. Mm-hmm. Just walk away for 30 minutes and come back. Lift the lid on the bowl, and if the food coloring's in the bowl, you got a leak.
All right. Well, and something easy. You said start with the flapper, though, to try and repair that problem.
It's usually the flapper.
Well, that's a good thing if that's all you have to replace.
Right.
That won't cost you much, and you can do it yourself. Well, we kind of want to move into some of these restrictions. What's the first one that really comes to mind when we're talking about differences in Stage 2 and 3?
Sure. The biggest one is with irrigation. Obviously, that in the summer is the biggest use of water you're going to see in a household. And so the Water Resources Committee wanted to restrict that back, and they really truly believe, as well as I do, that if we can get that restriction on irrigation, we will get that 35% reduction. And so they looked at what could be done. So they wanted to stay with the rationing map that we've got. So we're going to stay with once a week, depending on where you live.
You have your day.
You have your day. Nothing on Saturday or Sunday. And on your day, if you have an automatic sprinkler, it's controlled by a computer or a PLC or something, and they pop up, you can only use those from midnight to 5 a.m. After that, you can't use them anymore.
Before, you could use it any time as long as the one between like 11 and 6 or
That's
7,
correct.
Okay.
That's right. So basically, you had about 17 hours
Sure.
that you could water. With an automatic sprinkler, you can only water 5 now.
On your day.
On
so
your
it's
day.
midnight on your day, basically till 5 in the morning.
That's right. Now, if you have a hose end sprinkler, one that you screw onto the end of a water hose and it oscillates or sprays around, you can only use those from 8 p.m. to midnight. So those can only be used for 4 hours.
And it's a different time, I notice as well. It's not
That's
at
right.
the same time. Is there a reason for that?
So we can keep the pressures maintained in the system. That was one of the things we found in stage 2. In certain areas of town, when everybody had the opportunity to water, they did, and the pressure started to come down, which is a health concern. So we wanted to make sure that we could maintain system pressures.
That's interesting to note. So if you have the sprinklers that pop up from the ground, midnight to 5, otherwise, what was it again, 8?
Hose end, 8 p.m. to midnight. We encourage people to watch where that water's going. We are not regulating, like if you get it in the street and it's running down the curb, we're not giving tickets for sprinkler irrigation. However, drips and soaker hoses and bubbler systems, we don't regulate those on days or times. You can still use those any day, any time, because they're so much more efficient. But if you've altered those to where they send out more water, or you're using them inefficiently and we have water running down the curb from those, we will issue a ticket for that. But we won't for spray irrigation, because inherently you're always going to get some spray over.
How does this affect those who have a swimming pool?
Now, pools were one of those things that it's very hard to get a regulation for those. We looked at no pool use, we looked at covers, we looked at a lot of different things. And the resource committee, after discussing with pool industry professionals, decided that fountains and arcs, anything that kind of sprays water up in the air that increases the evaporation rate, that we would just restrict those. And so that will keep the evaporation down. The pool industry has indicated that you can turn those off and it will not do any damage to them. And that's the other thing. We didn't want to damage anybody's investment in their pool. Pools also, if you have to repair them, the water can only be drained to the point of repair, and then we'll allow you to refill it. And at the end of the season, don't drain your pool. And the reason for that is if we go into stage 4 while your pool is drained, you may not have the ability to refill it, and then you may compromise the structural integrity of it. So we want you to keep that pool water in there to keep it pushed out so it won't collapse.
And is this talking about underground and above ground pools as well?
It is, yes. Now the above ground pools, will, if you want to pack those up and put them away, yeah, you probably should do that, but I'm not going to guarantee that you'll be able to use above ground pools in stage 4.
What about kiddie pools? I mean, those have to be, you can't just leave those out. Of course, that could cause problems and bugs and all sorts of nasty things. So that water has to be dumped and refilled whenever you're going to use that. What if that's all families have? Can they use that in stage 3?
They can use the kiddie pools in stage 3. We haven't restricted any of the children's water toys like slip and slides or wiggle worms, or even the small kiddie pools. Those were not restricted. We did look at them, but the committee decided that they would not regulate them.
So you can still use those in stage 3?
That's correct, but you can't use them without a kid playing on it. So you can't put a slip and slide in your front yard and use it for irrigation.
Right, a bunch of wiggle worms running around your yard with no children.
You better have some
do
kids
that.
out there playing in it.
Right, not to water your yard that way. And is that any time of the day kids could do that? Because usually maybe at 2 in the afternoon, it's in the middle of the heat. That's when they're out there in the summer playing.
That's correct. There's no regulation against it.
Okay, so that hopefully answers any questions with that as far as the pools. If there is a number they need to call, maybe they have that repair to make, maybe they just have another question we weren't able to get to, who can they call and ask these to?
From 8 to 5 on Monday through Friday, they can call 761-7477, which is our water hotline. And after hours, it's 720-5000.
And that also, just to make a quick note, the slides. You know, if people have slides and water comes out of the slides to slide in your pool, those can't be used either then?
Those are considered water features, and they are restricted.
You know, we're going to get to businesses. I know a lot of questions I've heard has been, what about the water parks and the car washes and stuff? And we are going to get to all that. Anything else about personal use, though, changing in this stage that people need to know about?
The irrigation is the big thing. There's always things that we can do different inside the home. The city has on our website 100 ways to conserve water, and it is a great resource. I recommend it to anybody. So make sure you go to the city's website, www.wichitafallstx.gov, and read over that. I read it last year. I learned a few things that I didn't know. So the guys down at the Public Information Office did a good job on that.
And it is neat. I've actually had a chance to look over that as well. There are a lot of different things that maybe you've never thought about. Some, you know, maybe you've heard, but a great thing to print out, maybe make a fun thing out of it, teach some to your children, do some of those things. Like you said, get them involved in this. I think it's neat to learn this and important. You can save water in the long run, save money in the long run as well. If we do eventually, hopefully, do away with all these restrictions one day. I know that's the ultimate goal here. So, well, we need to take another quick break. Much more on how this Stage 3 drought emergency affects you, your family, your water bill, and of course your time. So stay with us. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are talking about the Stage 3 drought emergency and how this really affects you. Now, something else is car washes. And of course, you cannot wash your car in your driveway right now.
That's correct.
And, you know, this change could even affect maybe your favorite car wash, where you go to take your car, and why is that?
The car washes, we decided with the committee that we would restrict them to where they have to shut down one day a week to try and conserve water that way. And it's basically the day that they're supposed to irrigate.
How long are y'all predicting we're going to remain in Stage 3, and are we looking at a Stage 4?
We are looking at a Stage 4. We've been planning for the worst case since about March of last year. Our current projections indicate that we could be at Stage 4 as early as June of this year. And that's using the decline data from 2011.
So we just all need to keep hoping, keep praying for rain, of course, is the main thing. But moving on to restaurants, and just really quickly, if we can touch on that, it's not going to really affect everyone at home, so to speak, but a little bit of change for the restaurants as well for the restrictions.
That's correct. When we had them in the task force, we had realized that we had already affected them through the last drought and some of the regulations that we put in place that were year-round even. And working with them, we came up with what are some of the ways you guys are still using water that maybe you could cut back. And we came up with thawing meat and vegetables with warm water. They can obviously do that in a refrigerator or through a cooking process. So we restricted the thawing of food with water. And the other one was cleanup. And so they said, well, you know, we've got some spray hoses, but we can do that with mops and brooms. And so we restricted them to away from the spray, not irrigation, but spray hoses.
And, you know, a lot of people may have had some concern about that, but we actually did a story. You can find that at newschannel6now.com, and it's still a very healthy way to clean. We talked to people at the health department, and it could even be cleaner. And so, you know, it's definitely something interesting, and if you're concerned at all about that, I know you can find that story on our website, newschannel6now.com, for much more on the restrictions and how they affect restaurants in Texoma. Real quickly, the golf course. There are some restrictions to the golf course, but because of the investment, I understand the greens are not going to be affected.
That's correct. We started regulating golf courses back in Stage 2. We got a little bit more restrictive in Stage 3. They cannot irrigate their fairways, which is a huge expanse of grass. The greens are not going to be touched because a green can cost anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 worth of grass. And so we want them to keep those alive And so we're going to allow them to continue to water those, but they still cannot water between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. The heat of the day, it's not allowed.
As you can see across the board, lots of restrictions in place, even more businesses. Really quickly, I just want to hit on the water park and what is the thought behind, really not closing that down?
Sure. The water park is always kind of a contentious point with citizens. The water park is a business. We do want to keep it open. We're trying not to adversely impact the economy of Wichita Falls by saying any particular business, you're just shut down. Water park's the same way. We don't want to do that. We did discuss with other utilities in Texas that have water parks like Arlington and San Antonio. They do not restrict their water parks. And we also talked to the water parks to see if there were any things they do voluntarily. And we took all of that into consideration when we said we're going to keep Castaway Cove open. So we're just following suit just like Arlington or San Antonio would.
We're going to look a little closer at how this affects your bill and how it's going to impact your wallet after the break. So be sure and stay with us. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, we are looking out for you and your family when it comes to the Stage 3 drought emergency. Talking now about how this really impacts you and your wallet. A big thing and something, of course, we're all wanting to know. What happens if we go over, if we don't hit our 35% mark? We're looking at surcharges, fines if you violate, so lots to get to. I kind of want you to just break it down for us.
We have two different surcharge rates. We have one for residential and we have one for irrigation. The residential starts at 10 consumption, so the 0 to 10, it's just a normal water bill. After 10, it's $1 per consumption, up to 20. After 20, it goes up to $2. And then after 40, it goes up to $4. Now, irrigation meters, however, they start with drop 1. So the first consumption you use, there's a surcharge on it. And so it goes 0 to 10 is $1, 10 to 20 is $2, 20 to 40 is $4. Anything over 40, it's $8 per consumption.
Wow. So that can be an expensive water bill.
It adds up real quick.
And, just to point this out, that number, that 10 or 12 or whatever, is on the top of your water bill, correct?
That's correct. If you look at your water bill, it's in the upper left-hand corner, and it says usage. So you'll have a beginning and an ending value, and that usage is how much you used.
And the number, the magic number to avoid any extra fee, so to speak, is 10.
10 for residential.
Wow.
You're not going to get away with it with an irrigation meter, though.
But 10, and that still seems maybe low to some people, but the good news is the surcharges are not that heavy or hefty for going over a little bit right there.
That's correct. If you're a standard house of 4 and you use 13 consumptions, your water bill is going to go up $3.
And whenever we're talking about the summer, what's the average that a household, maybe a family of 4, would be using in the summer?
It's still about 13,
okay.
as long as you're not irrigating. That irrigating
That's
is what drives
it
it up. That's right. And we have some houses that have a residential meter and they have an irrigation meter, and that's why we have the irrigation meter surcharges.
Now, for those who have it all combined into one, you can still have a hefty bill, because once you hit the 20 mark, let's say you're thinking, okay, I'm going to keep watering because it's only $1. You're talking more surcharges, correct?
That's correct. Once you get to 20, you've already incurred $10 worth of surcharges. If you hit 20 and you go up to 30, that's another $20 worth
it doubles,
of yeah,
basically.
It doubles.
Wow. And of course, you can take a good look at this. I know it's all broken out for you on the city's website.
That's right.
And we'll provide a link to that. You can go to newschannel6now.com, and it's all laid out for you there as well. But something interesting to look at, maybe just pay a little more attention to your water bill and how you're using, and go back to those 100 ways to save.
That's right. The surcharge is not meant to penalize anyone. It's meant to get your attention. When you see that water bill and you say, hey, wait a second, you really start looking at how you're using that water.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that you don't want to see would
That's
be this hanging on your door. Can you talk about the violations?
This is a water violation citation. We hang it on your door. We find that you've violated the drought ordinance. It will check off and tell you what the violation we found was. We send a copy of this to municipal court. They will send you a letter in the mail saying you are to appear in court to answer this. The fine system is set up. First violation is $25 plus court costs, which is $64. So total first violation is like $89.
Wow.
Second offense is $500. And if you have a third offense, it goes up to $2,000.
Wow.
Plus that $64 court cost.
Oh my goodness. So this is something none of us want to see hanging on our door.
That's correct.
Just make sure you're taking a good look at that bill and following all those guidelines that we talked about. You can take another look at that and a full look at all of the Drought 3 emergency restrictions on our website, newschannel6now.com. You can also, of course, watch this entire show again, and Daniel will break it all down for you. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Texoma, for joining us. As always, we will see you back here next Sunday morning for another look inside Texoma.